MS-13 El Salvadorian illegal alien criminal who is hiding in Maryland has been nothing short of despicable. Based on the sensationalism of many of the people in this room, you would think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year. That's because, unfortunately, many in this country care more about this quote-unquote Maryland father, a legal alien MS-13 gang member, than a Maryland mother and an American citizen who was brutally murdered at the hands of a different illegal alien. Of course, I am referring to Rachel Morin. And if you didn't see, yesterday, a Maryland jury found illegal alien Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez guilty of murdering Rachel Morin in August of 2023. She was a 37-year-old mother of 5 who was jogging in an otherwise safe community northeast of Baltimore when this monster ambushed, strangled, and beat her to death before stuffing her brutalized body in a tunnel drain. The Morin family finally got justice yesterday, but they will never get Rachel back. Our hearts go out to Rachel's family, her 5 children, and her mother, Patty, who has suffered the unimaginable loss of her daughter. In case you missed it last week, President Trump signed a national security presidential memorandum directing federal agencies administering federal land on the border to make land available to the Defense Department in a new national defense area. This followed the president's Day 1 executive order committing his administration to marshal all available resources and authorities to stop the unprecedented flood of illegal aliens into our country and to obtain complete operational control of the borders of the United States of America. Once again, the president is fulfilling another key promise. This new national defense area spans more than 170 miles across our border in New Mexico, but in the coming weeks, this administration will add more than 90 miles in the state of Texas. This national defense area will enhance our ability to detect, interdict, and prosecute the illegal aliens, criminal gangs, and terrorists who were able to invade our country without consequence for the past 4 years under the Biden administration. It will also bolster our defenses against fentanyl and other dangerous narcotics that have been poisoning our communities. With all of this work being done to make America great again, we continue to see a positive response from the American public. A brand new poll published from the Daily Mail and JL Partners this morning found that President Trump's approval rating is at an all-time high. That's because the president is working tirelessly to keep his promises to the American people, as I just saw him doing today in the Oval Office. We have a reporter in our new media seat today, Matthew Foldy. I like your boots, Matt, who is the editor-in-chief of the Washington Reporter. Washington Reporter is a new, fast-growing outlet that breaks stories about legislation and interviews leaders in Congress and across the administration. The publication's readership includes the highest levels of business and government. And with that, please kick us off, Matt.
And we've interviewed you as well. So Karoline, thanks so much for having me here on behalf of our readership and the millions of Americans who I think appreciate what you're doing with the new media seat here and making this a more accessible briefing room. I'm curious with Harvard, we saw the Trump administration today announced it's cutting around $2 billion, or freezing $2 billion in funds to Harvard because the campus has serious problems with violence and with anti-Semitism. We saw President Obama, former President Obama, side with Harvard, which rejected the Trump administration's demands. I'm curious, where does the administration see this going with Harvard and with other colleges and universities in America that are refusing to reform in wake of the sort of craziness that we've seen take over some of them?
Thank you, Matt, for being here, and thanks for the question. When it comes to Harvard, the president's position on this is grounded in common sense, in the basic principle that Jewish American students, or students of any faith, should not be illegally harassed and targeted on our nation's college campuses. And we unfortunately saw that illegal discrimination take place on the campus of Harvard. There are countless examples to prove it, particularly with the stunning confession by then Harvard President Claudine Gay, who said that bullying and harassment depended on the context. The president at that time made it clear to the American public he was not going to tolerate illegal harassment and anti-Semitism taking place in violations of federal law. So the president made it clear to Harvard, follow federal law, no longer break Title VI, which was passed by Congress to ensure no student can be discriminated against on the basis of race, and you will receive federal funding. Unfortunately, Harvard has not taken the president or the administration's demands seriously. All the president is asking, don't break federal law, and then you can have your federal funding. I think the president is also begging a good question. more than $2 billion out the door to Harvard when they have a more than $50 billion endowment? Why are the American taxpayers subsidizing a university that has billions of dollars in the bank already? And we certainly should not be funding a place where such grave anti-Semitism exists.
And I'm curious, you had just mentioned Rachel Morin, and I'm a Maryland man, and I think most Marylanders appreciate what you were saying today. We've seen that Chris Van Hollen, who was Rachel Morin's senator, basically threatening to fly to El Salvador to press for the release of someone who was in America illegally. And not as much sort of from him about Rachel Morin's horrific murder and the verdict that was, I think, rightly reached yesterday. What does the administration think about the priorities we're seeing from Senate Democrats in terms of illegal immigrants instead of the work that agencies like ICE and DHS are doing with the Trump administration?
It's mind-boggling, the priorities of the modern-day Democrat Party. I think it's atrocious that you have Democrats in Congress on Capitol Hill who swear an oath to protect their constituents and to serve them in Washington, D.C., spending more time defending illegal immigrant gang members than their own constituents and law-abiding American citizens like Rachel Morin. And I saw the president personally on the campaign trail, and I continue to see him in his role as president of the United States put American families first, reach out to the victims, the families of victims at the hands of illegal immigrant crime. And frankly, the actions and the words of the Democrat Party prove they could not care less about the American public. And maybe if they did, they'd see a bit higher approval ratings right now. Thanks for being here with us today. Peter.
Thank you, Karoline. To follow up on something that you just said, why do Ivy League schools get so much federal funding?
It's a very good question, and it's a question the president has obviously raised in his discussions and negotiations with not just Harvard, but also Columbia and many other Ivy League institutions. We have the Antisemitism Task Force, which the president promised and delivered on. The Antisemitism Task Force is across the government, representatives from various federal agencies who meet on a weekly basis to discuss the question that you just raised. And I think a lot of Americans are wondering why their tax dollars are going to these universities when they are not only indoctrinating our nation's students, but also allowing such egregious illegal behavior to occur.
To follow up on immigration, deporting American citizens to Central American prisons, is it legal, or do you need to change the law to do it?
Well, it's another question that the president has raised. It's a legal question that the president is looking into. And he talked about this yesterday when with his meeting with President Bukele in the Oval Office. He would only consider this, if legal, for Americans who are the most violent, egregious, repeat offenders of crime who nobody in this room wants living in their communities.
And then there's this CHNV thing. President Biden let more than 530,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela into the U.S. with this CHNV program. He did it with the stroke of a pen. And now a judge will not let President Trump undo it with the stroke of a pen. So are you guys going to give all 530,000 plus people individual deportation hearings, or are you just going to try to deport them?
I spoke to White House counsel's office about this morning because obviously another rogue district court judge is trying to block the administration's mass deportation efforts with this latest injunction. We will fight this in the court of law, and we will ensure that every individual who illegally entered our country and was really taken advantage of by the previous administration because they abused the parole system in this country to fast track legal status, as they said, for these illegal immigrants. And they completely abused our legal system. Many of these paroled individuals were then given temporary protective status, which the intention of that TPS was only supposed to be used in times of war or storm or destruction in the home countries of these migrants. It was completely abused. These migrants came here for economic reasons, and they illegally entered our country, and the president is not going to tolerate that. And so we will continue to focus on deporting as many individuals as we can. Jennifer.
One on tariffs and one on Russia. Can you give us any sort of an update on which deals are in hand or are close? Which countries are reaching a deal on tariffs? And then on Russia, can you give us an update on what the agreement was with Russia? The president yesterday said that he thinks we'll be seeing some very good deals very soon. Can you talk a little bit about what Russia agreed to?
Sure. I don't want to get ahead of our United States Trade Ambassador and Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Treasury, all the great individuals who are working incredibly hard to cut these good trade deals. And the president's deeply involved in this as well. He has made it clear to his trade team he wants to personally sign off on all of these deals too. And so I don't want to get ahead of them on announcements, but obviously, as you've heard from numerous administration officials, there have been many talks with countries. We've had more than 15 deals, pieces of paper put on the table, proposals that are actively being considered. And as we've said consistently, more than 75 countries have reached out. So there's a lot of work to do. We very much understand that, but we do believe that we can announce some deals very soon.
And then on Russia, can you say, did Russia agree to anything with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff?
I don't want to get ahead of those negotiations as well. What I can tell you is that they were a productive conversation was had. As the presidential envoy Steve Witkoff said last night, he believes that Russia wants to end this war, and the president believes that as well. There is incentive for Russia to end this war, and perhaps that could be economic partnerships with the United States, but we need to see a ceasefire first, and the president and the presidential envoy Witkoff made that very clear to the Russians. Gabe.
Thank you, Caroline. And
Yeah.
I also want to thank your press office for releasing that information that you cited up there regarding the ICE arrests over the last couple of days. And I have them right here, but what I might ask is, why not release the same information for those who were deported to El Salvador?
Well, first of all, that information was released by the Department of Homeland Security. The individuals on the flights to El Salvador are foreign terrorists, and those are counterterrorism operations. They are much different than the arrests and final order of removals that you see on a day-to-day basis that law enforcement agents are conducting around the country.
That information was not, to that detail, was not released by DHS, though.
I just told you the reason. It was a counterterrorism operation, a deportation of foreign terrorists, not illegal criminals who have been convicted of heinous crimes living in our American communities. It's two different things. Foreign terrorist, illegal immigrant criminal, two different things, two different definitions. You should look them up. Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Does the president support raising the corporate tax rate to pay for all these other tax cuts he wants to see move through Congress?
Look, I've seen this idea proposed. I've heard this idea discussed, but I don't believe the president has made a determination on whether he supports it or not.
And then secondly, do you have any information on the status of Eden Alexander? Hamas says they lost contact with the unit guarding him following an Israeli airstrike earlier today.
I don't have updates. I have not seen that report, but I can certainly check in with our National Security Council. I have spoken to the president about Eden Alexander, and he's made it very clear to our national security team that finding him is a priority, but unfortunately I don't have any updates to share. But it's a very important matter, and certainly we can check in. Sure.
Hi. How
Hi.
concerned is the president that a federal judge could hold a Trump administration official in contempt of court for defying deportation orders?
We are complying with all court orders. So I see what you're trying to do there with that question, but we're very confident that every action taken by this administration is within the confines of the law, and we continue to comply with the court's orders. And you have seen that, and the president made that clear yesterday in the Oval Office with President Bukele. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. Could you, just going back to El Salvador, could you just explain to us a little bit more about the legal basis on which you may be able to send US citizens to prison there? I know you said President Trump is looking at it, but can you explain to us a little bit more about how that might be possible?
We're looking at it, and when I have more for you to share, I certainly will. Sure.
Still going off the El Salvador questions, yesterday in the Oval Office, administration officials made it very clear that El Salvador is responsible for Mr. Abrego Garcia, yet El Salvador's president said we're not going to do anything with him. So my question is, who is responsible for this man and where he's going to end up?
Well, no. First of all, President Bukele said that he is not going to smuggle a foreign terrorist back into the United States of America, as many in this room in the Democrat Party seemingly want him to do. Abrego Garcia was a foreign terrorist. He is an MS-13 gang member. He was engaged in human trafficking. He illegally came into our country. And so deporting him back to El Salvador was always going to be the end result. There is never going to be a world in which this is an individual who's going to live a peaceful life in Maryland, because he is a foreign terrorist an MS-13 gang member. Not only have we confirmed that, President Bukele yesterday in the Oval Office confirmed that as well. So he went back to his home country where he will face consequences for his gang affiliation and his engagement in human trafficking. I'm not sure what is so difficult about this for everyone in the media to understand, and it's appalling, truly appalling, that there has been so much time covering this alleged human trafficker and this gang member, MS-13 gang member. It's truly striking to me. Karen.
Thanks, Caroline. The president was posting on Truth Social today about helping American farmers. And last week in his cabinet meeting, he was talking about a plan to work with farmers to retain workers who are in the U.S. illegally, provided that they leave and then come back through what he said would be a legal process. Can you give details on what that would look like, how many workers he's talking about, how long a plan like that would take to implement, and the timeline for more details on getting this actually to implementation?
I can check in with our immigration and our policy team and get you some more details on that, Karen.
And is this something he wants to roll out soon? I mean, he was talking back and forth with Secretary Rollins.
Right.
This is kind of imminent that he wants to do this.
Yeah, look, the president is in constant communication with all of his cabinet secretaries, particularly Secretary Rollins, who has the backs of American farmers and ranchers. It's something that he spoke about with her in the front of all the cameras in the cabinet room, but I'll check in with not only our immigration team, but also with USDA, and we'll get you an answer. Jonathan.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, it's good to see you in here.
You too. The president has long said that it would be an abuse of power for a president to direct prosecutors to investigate him. Last week, President Trump explicitly directed the Justice Department to scrutinize Chris Krebs to see if it can find any evidence of criminal wrongdoing. How is that not an abuse of power to direct the Justice Department to look into an individual, a named individual?
Look, the president signed that executive order. It's the position of the president in this White House that it's well within his authority to do it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have signed it. And he signed it, and that's his policy. Jeff, how you doing?
Fine, thanks. Thanks, Caroline. A follow-up on Harvard. The president floated on Truth Social, I believe, the possibility of removing tax-exempt status. How serious is that threat, and are there other universities he's considering? And then a follow-up question on foreign policy. Can you give us an update on what the president hopes to come from the next round of talks with Iran?
Sure. First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. There were professors who said that he had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the former president of the university saying bullying and harassment depends on the context. You also had an encampment on Harvard Yard that we all saw play out before the cameras. The university failed to impose formal discipline on any students for this anti-Semitic conduct violations, including the occupation of a campus building and the disruption of classes with bullhorns. The president believes Harvard should apologize to its Jewish American students for allowing such egregious behavior. As for the tax-exempt status, I would defer you to the IRS for any updates. I do want to answer your question on Iran, of course. The maximum pressure campaign on Iran continues, but as you know, the president has made it clear he wants to see dialogue and discussion with Iran while making his directive about Iran never being able to obtain a nuclear weapon quite clear. And the president spoke to the Sultan of Oman today, who helped facilitate these talks. I have a readout for all of you. He held a call with the Sultan of Oman today, and he thanked him for hosting the first direct meeting between the United States and Iran and emphasized the need for Iran to end its nuclear program through negotiations. The two leaders also discussed the United States' ongoing operations against the Houthis and emphasized that the Houthis will pay a severe price until they end their attacks on maritime traffic in the Red Sea. As you know, an additional negotiation between Steve Witkoff and Iran's representative has been scheduled for Saturday. And since these are ongoing negotiations, I have nothing more to add on that.
Thanks about Iran.
Sure.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. When you said that the president said that Iran will never have nuclear weapon, is the focus on dismantling the entire nuclear program, or it just restricting enriched uranium or the missile program?
The president does not want to see Iran have a nuclear program. He does not want Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. He's been very clear about this. Shelby.
Thanks,
Shelby, you have a seat today.
I know, stole it.
Glad to see it.
2 quick ones on TikTok. First, is the president expecting to extend the TikTok ban that's now June 19th if China doesn't come to the table in time?
Well, June 19th is a long ways away, obviously. I think it's 2 months away. 2 months is a long time, and the Trump administration, as you have all seen, we work at Trump speed around here. We get a lot done, so definitely don't want to get ahead. The vice president continues to lead these negotiations and talks. The president's involved, and they're ongoing.
And then the president previously said he'd consider reducing tariffs on China in order to get a TikTok deal done. Is that option still on the table?
Look, the president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. There's no difference between China and any other country except they are much larger. And China wants what we have, what every country wants, what we have, the American consumer. Or to put it another way, they need our money. So the president, again, has made it quite clear that he's open to a deal with China, but China needs to make a deal with the United States of America. Sure.
On tariffs, yesterday in the Oval Office...
Which outlet are you with?
The Canadian Public Broadcaster.
Oh, nice to see you.
Thank you. Yesterday in the Oval Office, President Trump suggested that there could be some help for automakers. I'm wondering what that looks like. Is it tariff relief on the 25% tariffs that are in place right now, or the new tariffs that are coming up in May on auto parts? And a second on Canada, if I may. President Trump's tone when it comes to Canada-U.S. relations, Canadians have noticed it's shifted a bit in the past few weeks. Ever since the election campaign started, he stopped talking about Canada becoming the 51st state, at least publicly. I'm wondering if that's on purpose and why.
I would reject the president's position on Canada has shifted. Perhaps he just hasn't been asked about Canada by questions from this group in the Oval Office, but they see him almost every day. But the president still maintains his position on Canada. The United States has been subsidizing Canada's national defense, and he believes that Canadians would benefit greatly from becoming the 51st state of the United States of America. As for autos and auto parts, I don't have anything to read out for you there, but I think the point the president was making is flexibility, and he has flexibility when it comes to negotiations and talks, but ultimately his goal in his fair trade deals that he is pursuing with many countries around the world is to put the American worker first. And we had automakers and auto workers here at the White House on Liberation Day who believe in this president and his negotiating ability to put them first and to bring those jobs back to the United States of America. And the president's been very clear about that in his conversations with the automakers as well. Deanna, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. One on Ukraine and one on China. On Ukraine, this past weekend, Zelensky offered an invitation to President Trump, extending an offer for him to visit Ukraine. Just wondering if there's any update on that. Has Trump seen that offer and what he's thinking about?
I don't know. Actually, I haven't talked to the president about that, or if he saw Zelensky's offer. I'm sure he did. I haven't spoken to him about it. I can ask him what he thinks. I certainly don't have any plans to share on a potential trip to Ukraine, though.
And then on China, this last week, Chinese officials were posting videos on social media sites depicting Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk in AI-generated videos working in factories, putting together Nike shoes and iPhones and products like that. Does the White House, have they seen these videos? Do you guys have a response to that?
I have seen the videos. I'm not sure who made the videos or if we can verify the authenticity, but whoever made it clearly does not see the potential of the American worker, the American workforce. The president believes in the American people, and he knows that we have the best not only consumer base in the world, but also the best workforce in the world, and that's why he's so focused on bringing investments home and shoring up our critical supply chains and bolstering our manufacturing here as well. Brett.
Thanks, Caroline. Would the president support a ban on members of Congress trading stocks?
I'm certain that's something the president would be interested in looking at, and I can ask him if he would support such a bill. Sure. Yes.
I have a question about the president's post from this morning on farmers. He asked farmers to be patient and just hold on. But a lot of farmers that I've talked to in the last week or so have said, they're in the middle of spring planting season, and that a trade war makes everything sort of up in the air. What would his message to them be? And also, is there anything specifically planned to provide relief like in President Trump's last term?
Yes, well, relief is being considered. The Secretary of Agriculture, I know, has spoken to the President about that, and again, it's being considered. And as for the President's message to the farmers, he put it out himself. He could speak for himself much better than I can speak for him, and so I would just direct you to the statement he had telling the farmers again and reiterating his support for them and that he has their backs, which he certainly does. Kelly, in the back.
Thanks, Caroline. 2 questions. The first one, a Georgia man was just arrested over alleged threats to kill Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Reportedly, there is now increased security around the FBI Deputy Director. Can you talk about the level of threats against various administration officials, and then a second one on Biden?
I'm sorry to hear that. I had not seen that report. It's very unfortunately, and obviously the White House, the President, and the entire administration condemn any threats of violence against any administration officials or public officials on both sides of the aisle here in Washington, D.C. It shouldn't be tolerated, and we commend the local law enforcement agencies for arresting this individual.
Former President Biden, he's set to deliver his first major speech since leaving office tonight. He plans to talk about what I'm told will be Social Security under the current administration, closing of offices, longer wait times, harder for seniors and people with disabilities to access earned benefits, is what Democrats have been saying today. I wanted to get the President's response, or if he plans to respond to this, and comments on what Democrats are calling cuts to Social Security.
My first reaction when seeing former President Biden was speaking tonight was I'm shocked that he is speaking at nighttime. I thought his bedtime was much earlier than his speech tonight. I understand the topic of his speech will be Social Security. Let me make it very clear ahead of former President Biden's remarks. President Trump, is absolutely certain about protecting Social Security benefits for law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens and seniors who have paid into this program. He will always protect that program. He campaigned on it, he protected it in his first term, and he's back again to continue protecting it. On the topic of Social Security, I have some news before I let you all go. Later this afternoon, the President will be signing a presidential memorandum aimed at stopping illegal aliens and other ineligible people from obtaining Social Security Act benefits. The memorandum will direct the administration to ensure ineligible aliens are not receiving funds from the Social Security Act programs. It will expand the Social Security Administration's fraud prosecutor program to at least 50 U.S. attorney offices and establishes a Medicare and Medicaid fraud prosecution program in 15 U.S. attorney offices. The